Jake jolted awake to the sharp, relentless pounding on his front door. His phone vibrated on the nightstand, the screen glowing with an unknown number. A glance at the clock, **2:078 am. His heart thumped against his ribs. Who the hell was at his door at this hour? His first instinct was to ignore it, but the knocking only grew louder. More forceful. Whoever stood outside wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. Grumbling under his breath, he swung his legs out of bed, his feet sinking into the cool floor. He padded to the window, cautiously peeling back the blinds. A lone figure stood under the dim porch light, her posture rigid, fists clenched at her sides. The scowl on her face was unmistakable even through the shadows. Karen. The self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. The woman whose entire existence revolved around making everyone else's lives miserable. Jake sighed, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He was barely on speaking terms with her, mostly because he had the audacity to own a house outside the HOA's jurisdiction. That didn't stop her from acting like she had some sort of claim over his property. And now here she was, on his porch in her pink robe and fuzzy slippers, looking every bit the deranged tyrant. The knocking turned into full-on banging. Jake. Open this door right now. He took a deep breath, willing himself to stay calm. Yanking the door open, he was immediately hit with the sharp scent of Karen's overpowering perfume, an aggressive floral assault that burned his tired senses. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded, squinting against the porch light. Karen's face twisted into a smug expression, as if she were the one inconvenienced. "Oh, wonderful. You're awake." "No thanks to you," he muttered. "I need your spare key," she announced, folding her arms across her chest. Jake blinked, wondering if he'd misheard her. "You need what?" Karen let out an exasperated sigh, as if he were being deliberately slow. "Your key. To the house. Specifically the backyard gate." A beat of silence. Jake let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You're kidding, right?" Karen's lips pursed, her nostrils flaring. "This is serious. The HOA has voted to include your pool in our community amenities and we need access." His grip on the doorknob tightened. "Karen, my house isn't in the HOA. Well, technically. No, not technically. At all." Karen waved a dismissive hand. "Jake, let's be reasonable. Your pool is right there. It makes no sense for it to be off limits. The community would love access, and I, as HOA president, am authorized to make decisions that benefit the neighborhood." His patience thinned. "Karen, I don't care what the HOA wants. My house isn't part of it, and you have no right to demand my keys." Her face darkened. "You're being selfish. This is about the greater good." Jake scoffed. "No, this is about you wanting to control something that doesn't belong to you. My property isn't a public pool." Karen's eyes flashed with something sinister. "I'd rethink your stance if I were you." He narrowed his eyes. "Is that a threat?" She smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "I wouldn't call it that. But the HOA has ways of making things difficult for uncooperative residents." Jake clenched his jaw. He was so done with this lunacy. Without another word, he stepped back and slammed the door in her face. A muffled shriek of outrage rang through the wood, followed by furious pounding. "You can't just, Jake. You are making a big mistake." He walked away, letting her rage against the door. He'd dealt with her nonsense before, but this was a whole new level of insanity. The pounding stopped, but his phone lit up again. A known number. He ignored it. A few moments later, his ears picked up another sound. A low murmur. Voices. Jake exhaled sharply and turned back to the window. What he saw sent a chill racing down his spine. Karen wasn't alone anymore. Two other HOA board members, middle-aged men in sweatpants and windbreakers, stood beside her, their faces grim, their eyes locked on his house. One of them had a clipboard. The other was taking photos of his yard with his phone. What the actual? Before he could finish the thought, flashing red and blue lights washed over the front of his house. Jake's stomach dropped. Karen turned with an exaggerated gasp, hands flying to her chest. "Oh, thank goodness you're here. He assaulted me." Jake's blood ran cold. Two officers stepped out of the squad car, their expressions unreadable as they approached. Karen dabbed at non-existent tears. "He refused to comply with HOA regulations. And when I asked for the key nicely, he threatened me." Jake stared at her, stunned. "Are you serious right now?" One of the officers turned to him. "Sir, we received a report of a disturbance at this address. Mind stepping outside to explain what's going on?" Jake dragged a hand down his face. This was insane. But one look at Karen's triumphant smirk told him, this was just the beginning. Jake stepped outside, the cool night air doing little to settle the fire raging inside him. The red and blue strobes painted sharp shadows across his yard, casting Karen's smug face in an eerie glow. The officers stood firm, their expressions unreadable, while Karen clutched the collar of her robe like a Victorian widow in distress. He was aggressive, she insisted, her voice trembling with well-rehearsed fragility. I knocked and he screamed at me. Then he lunged. I was terrified for my safety. Jake let out a sharp breath, clenching his fists. He had half a mind to laugh at the sheer absurdity of it. Instead, he forced himself to stay calm. Losing his temper would only play into Karen's hands. One of the officers, a middle-aged man with weary eyes, turned to him. Sir, can you tell us your side of the story? Jake crossed his arms. She woke me up at 2 in the morning demanding the key to my backyard. She claims the HOA has some right to my pool, which it doesn't. When I refused, she started banging on my door, screaming. I never laid a hand on her. Karen let out an indignant gasp. He's lying. Look, I even have proof. She pulled out her phone, frantically tapping the screen. I called him earlier and he ignored me. That alone is aggressive behavior. The younger officer, a woman with sharp features, raised a brow. Ma'am, ignoring a phone call isn't a crime. Karen's mouth flapped for a moment before she recovered. Fine. But I have witnesses. She gestured to the 2 HOA board members, who were standing by the sidewalk, shifting uncomfortably. They saw everything. One of them, a balding man in a windbreaker, cleared his throat. Well, we arrived after the fact. But we heard yelling. Jake let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, because she was losing her mind on my porch. The officers exchanged glances. The man sighed. Look, this seems like a neighbor dispute, not a police matter. He turned to Karen. Unless you have any actual evidence of an assault, we can't do anything here. Karen's face contorted, her mask of distress cracking to reveal the venom underneath. But he's hoarding community property. That pool is for all of us. Jake pinched the bridge of his nose. It's not. My house isn't in the HOA. I have the paperwork to prove it. The younger officer folded her arms. Ma'am, do you have any legal documents that say his property is under HOA jurisdiction? Karen's lips parted, but no sound came out. She didn't. And they all knew it. The older officer exhaled through his nose, clearly out of patience. Then I suggest you head home. Waking your neighbors and making false accusations isn't a great look. Karen's face twisted with barely contained rage, but she wasn't stupid enough to argue with the police. She turned sharply on her heel and stormed off, her slippers slapping against the pavement. Her 2 lackeys hesitated before following her, casting nervous glances back at Jake. The officers turned to leave. The younger one paused, offering Jake a knowing look. If she bothers you again, document everything. And call us before it escalates. Jake nodded, watching as they got into their car and drove away. As soon as the flashing lights disappeared down the street, he let out a slow breath, rolling the tension from his shoulders. But just as he stepped back inside, he spotted something out of the corner of his eye. A stack of papers, neatly taped to his front door. His stomach sank. He peeled one off, scanning the bold letters at the top. Violation notice. Below it, a list of absurd infractions. Unauthorized pool use. Improper lawn maintenance. Failure to comply with HOA regulations. His jaw clenched so hard it ached. He flipped to the last page. In looping, self-important cursive, Karen's signature gleamed at the bottom. So this was how she wanted to play it. Fine. Let the games begin. Jake sat at his kitchen table, the violation notice spread out before him like a declaration of war. His fingers drummed against the wood, his mind racing. Karen had overplayed her hand. She thought she could intimidate him, harass him into compliance. But she'd made a critical mistake. She had underestimated just how much he hated being pushed around. He grabbed his laptop, flipping it open with a determined snap. A quick search confirmed what he already knew. The HOA had zero legal authority over his property. His house sat just outside the association's boundary. He owed them nothing, and Karen's little stunt with the violation notices was nothing more than an empty bluff. But that didn't mean he could just ignore it. Karen wasn't the type to back down. She was obsessed with control, and he knew she wouldn't stop until she either got what she wanted or faced consequences so severe she had no choice but to retreat. Fine. He'd give her consequences. The first step was to fight fire with fire. Jake dug through his filing cabinet until he found exactly what he needed: his property deed. Clear as day, it proved that his land was not part of the HOA. He made copies, scanning them into his computer for good measure. Next, he composed a formal cease and desist letter, outlining the harassment, the false violation notices, and the blatant abuse of authority. He kept his tone professional, but the underlying message was clear: back off or face legal action. Then, for the finishing touch, he forwarded everything to a real lawyer, his cousin Mark, who happened to specialize in property disputes. By the time he was done, the first light of dawn was creeping through the blinds. He sat back, stretching his sore shoulders. Step 1 was complete. Now he just had to wait. The retaliation came faster than expected. That afternoon, a tow truck rumbled onto his street. Jake barely had time to register what was happening before the driver hopped out and started hooking up his truck. Jake stormed outside. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" The driver, a burly guy in an oil-stained jumpsuit, barely looked up. "Got an order to tow this vehicle. HOA request." Jake's hands curled into fists. "This isn't an HOA property." The driver frowned, glancing down at his clipboard. "Says here it's a restricted vehicle, parked in violation of community guidelines." Jake's patience snapped. "Let me make this clear. My property isn't under the HOA. That order? Illegal. If you touch my truck, I will sue you and your company so hard your grandkids will feel it." The driver hesitated. He clearly didn't want trouble. "Look man, I'm just doing my job." Jake stepped closer, voice low. "And I'm just giving you a fair warning. Karen sent you on a fake call to harass me. You want to risk a lawsuit over that?" The man exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Finally he muttered, "Screw this," and unhooked the truck. "I don't get paid enough for this HOA crap." As the tow truck rumbled away, Jake turned, already knowing exactly where to look. Sure enough, across the street, Karen stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching like a vulture. Jake grinned. He raised his phone, deliberately making sure she saw him snap a picture. Then he gave her a slow, mocking wave. For the first time, she was the one whose face twisted in frustration. Good. Because this wasn't over. It was just getting started. The next morning, Jake was ready. He had spent the night ensuring every detail of his plan was airtight. If Karen wanted a war, she was about to get one. He started by making everything public. The photos, the fake violations, the illegally ordered tow. He compiled it all into a detailed post and shared it in the neighborhood Facebook group, where every resident, including HOA members, could see it. He wrote it carefully, ensuring he sounded reasonable and wronged, not petty. He ended the post with a question. Asterisk. If the HOA can do this to someone who isn't even part of it, what's stopping them from abusing their actual members? Asterisk. The response was explosive. Comments poured in. Residents who had long suffered under Karen's iron rule vented their frustrations. Some shared their own horror stories, fines for non-existent violations, threats of legal action over minor infractions, even an elderly couple being harassed over their incorrectly painted mailbox. Then came the people within the HOA board. A few members, likely sick of Karen's antics, started distancing themselves. One admitted she had no knowledge of any vote to seize Jake's pool. Another confirmed Karen often made decisions without approval. Karen must have seen the post because not even an hour later, she was back on Jake's porch. This time, she wasn't alone. Two men in suits stood beside her, their expressions neutral but their presence intimidating. Karen, however, looked furious. Jake opened the door and leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "You sure you want to be here? You're not exactly popular in the neighborhood right now." Karen's smile was tight, forced. "Jake, let's not turn this into something ugly." He raised a brow. "Oh, I think we passed ugly when you tried to steal my pool." One of the suited men, a lawyer judging by the expensive briefcase, cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, we'd like to resolve this peacefully. The HOA has decided to rescind the violation notices and will no longer pursue access to your property." Jake smirked. "How generous. Too bad that doesn't erase the harassment, false police reports, and attempted vehicle theft." Karen's face twitched. "Oh, don't be dramatic." "Dramatic?" Jake laughed. "You called the cops on me, Karen. You tried to get my truck towed illegally. And now that you're caught, you want to sweep it under the rug." The lawyer stepped in again. "Mr. Carter, if you drop this matter, the HOA is willing to issue a formal apology." Jake tilted his head. "And what happens to Karen?" The second suit, a man who had been silent until now, spoke up. "The board is having an emergency vote tonight regarding her removal as president." Karen's head snapped toward him. "What?" Jake's grin widened. "Oh, that is interesting." Karen's carefully controlled rage shattered. You traitors. You can't do this. I built this HOA. I made it what it is. The lawyer sighed. And that's precisely the problem, Miss Bennett. Jake folded his arms. So, let me get this straight. You're not only backing down but you're throwing Karen under the bus. Karen turned back to him, her face twisted in hatred. This isn't over. Jake shrugged. No, but your reign sure is. That night as he relaxed by his pool, untouched exactly as it should be, his phone buzzed. A message from one of the HOA members. Karen was voted out. Unanimous. Asterisk asterisk. Jake smirked, tossing his phone onto the chair beside him. Justice served.